Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, Samsung's 850 EVO gets benchmarked, ASUS Maximus Impact motherboard reviewed, NZXT's H440 gets a Razer makeover, Samsung's Gear VR Y-Gig revisited, and more. It's all coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
Hi, this is Leo Laporte, and if you'd like to help us design our new website, I invite you to visit twit.to/navtest. We've got 8 quick questions we'd like to ask you that will help us make the navigation easier to use. That's twit.to/navtest. Thanks a lot.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 295, recorded December 8th, 2014. Samsung 850 EVO tested.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code TWiCH at checkout.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, most amusing news in computer hardware. We love the tablets, we love the mobile, we occasionally even love on the cell phones, but don't tell our mothers. Joining me as always, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ryan, what did he just say, Schrouts?
I question that quite often on the show. You know, I'm looking at, and as we record this, I'm looking at my name on the lower third. I'm looking at the logo we have there, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe the hardware we use in that picture is starting to show its age. I'm pretty sure that's an original Pentium processor with the TWiCH letters across it, and then that's like a Pentium 3 socketed part in there as well. I don't know what that says. I don't think I did we didn't do the show at all when Pentium 3 was out. So we started old. Yeah.
Hey man, when you're looking for royalty-free clip art, you use what you can. Have you found any royalty-free clip art of ARM processors? Huh?
No. They probably most people I think would say, "Hey, free advertising," but maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
I want to know who wants to know why Windows does not have autocorrect for touchscreen keyboards. Because personally, I am so in love with the idea of never having autocorrect again in my life on most of my devices. Perhaps because of my why? What brought this on?
So recently, one of the projects we had at the office was to mount an all-in-one computer onto the wall. That didn't have VESA mounts, but that's a different story. So we had to build this wooden contraption, kind of sandwich it in. And we wanted to use it as a way to monitor all the projects that are ongoing, kind of check in and out of projects, and something that was easy to allow us to monitor the website. And that's all great. We found a Sony Tap 21 that we had here. We put Windows 10 on it, just to mess around with stuff, and then we've got some applications that are up and running on it. Now the problem is, it's mounted to the wall, so the primary input method should be the touchscreen keyboard, which, hey, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, they all have built-in support for touchscreen devices. The problem is, when you're typing on it, not just like autocorrect in terms of correcting spellings, although that would be something that I think would be very helpful. For example, when you type the word comparison and you transpose the S and the O at the end, that it would be nice if it just kind of automatically fixed that. I think that would be a plus. The fact that when you hit space twice, a period isn't created, and then the next letter you type is automatically capitalized, like that's not in there. Right. There's a lot of like little things that I have come to expect and really appreciate on my Android devices and any iOS devices like the iPad I use, that make touch keyboard typing at least functional, right? I don't want to write big long emails on it or full stories for sure, but taking a couple of notes or on that system back there, if I want to say, hey, added these 2 benchmarks, needs to run overnight to do this, something like that. And it's much more cumbersome on the Windows on-screen keyboard than it would be on an iPad or an Android tablet or even on one of my phones. So I find that really discouraging. And I guess this also goes to show how little I used Windows 8 in a touch environment at all in that first lifespan that it had, because I never really complained about this problem before, I don't think. So I kind of did like a real quick cursory glance around the internet, like, oh, are there like tools you can add that kind of add that functionality to the keyboard? And nothing really that kind of stood out that also wasn't a like drastic redesign of the kind of keyboard IO system in its entirety. I don't think swipe really makes sense on a 22-inch screen, because when you got to make huge gestures with your finger across it, that's probably bad. But I don't know. You said you didn't like autocorrect, but I mean, does it make sense? Like, there's some things like it should just do better, I guess.
Yeah, part of my issue is that I've been turning autocorrect off. I turned it off on my iPhones. I've turned it back on the Android device. But it amazes me how often it's in OS 10 particularly. It was getting super obnoxious in some of the apps I used. I've been doing a lot of work in inside of WordPad. It doesn't seem to be causing me as many fails, but I don't know if it's my vocabulary or the way I type at the particular, but it's just been amazing to watch how many times I've had words and or oh goodness, when you condense something down to a bunch of letters.
Acronyms.
Thank you. Where it's turned out something that was perfectly reasonable but completely wrong. And so I'm a little down on spell check right now, just overall. And
I don't think I'd say I'm about 50-50 on it in general, like on my phone. But when I use something like swipe on my phone, or any of those types of the swipe input keyboards, I guess that's not really autocorrect as much as it is kind of intelligent kind of programming to figure out what you want to do. But yeah, I would say very disappointed in how, like, I don't know how they expect people to use touch keyboards in that fashion in any kind of extended use. But
this is also the brain trust that decided that they could actually shift the entire Windows user base to using, full screen applications that were primarily designed for a touch environment in the middle of one operating system with no preparation. So I don't want to tick off anybody at Microsoft, because obviously a lot of the primary players have changed since the initial Windows 8 release and the interface formerly known as Metro, which I got to say had a lot going for it as an interface. But at this point, I think they're just trying to get people to use the operating system, which actually has picked up in use in a big way in the last 6 months, 8 months. But at this point, I think you're right. A lot of what they're trying to figure out probably is how can they do something interesting, making the keyboard more useful or more intuitive, while working with the weird, complications of 17 to 40-inch touch screens and living room environments and controls. Probably without, stomping on a patent that's already owned by some mobile company. And I think probably the last part is figuring out, like, swipe probably would work on a 22-inch screen, because you can't really touch type on a screen.
No.
You can kind of do it.
I think what I'll probably end up doing is figuring out a way to put like a Bluetooth keyboard on a hinge, and then put that at the wall instead, and just suck it up and realize that, keyboard and mouse input is still optimal for computing. And
there's a reason.
And also, I was blown away that there's no voice like dictation in the Windows keyboard. Like, there's no button I can hit to, like on Android or iOS, where I hit it and I say a sentence and it tries to trans whatever into text. Like, there's no speech to text in it, and that's like how do you? I don't know. It boggled my mind. Like, I literally brought up the keyboard.
Even Amazon built that into the remote control.
Yeah.
I know it's funny because it's Harmony. Harmony built Logitech Harmony built the smart keyboard for their Harmony remote environment, and I remember they showed it to me, and the PR people that are, and the product manager, I think it was product manager, they're introducing the product, they have that look like they've heard 17 times that day. Well, why do I want a keyboard in my living room? And I'm like, oh, oh, finally, I can search Netflix or Apple or the iTunes store, or I can type in a password longer than 6 characters and do it on a proper keyboard, and it allows me to do all this cool stuff inside of the Harmony environment. And they were like, they had this like really thankful look on their faces, like finally someone who actually uses this stuff in the living room. Somebody that understands. But it's hard. I don't think I understand why everybody wants touchscreens to a certain degree. I don't find it a particularly great interface for a lot of the stuff I use in a computer. It's fun when I'm like, oh, I'm looking at a photo and I'm gonna, I'm gonna make it bigger. I'm gonna make it smaller. But mostly I find it in interference. Like 90% of the time when I'm using my touchscreen, it's to swipe the lock screen up before typing in my password, which I can do by whacking the space bar with my thumb too. But, I guess I got to just acknowledge like, okay, I got a touchscreen. Still can't talk to my computer. The eye tracking thing that was so cool at CES 3 years ago has gone nowhere, but I got a touchscreen. I don't know, maybe someone at Microsoft is listening right now and going, what were we thinking? Or maybe they're going, if you had to qualify on 72,000 variations of hardware, you wouldn't have a microphone or a complicated keyboard system in your operating system either.
Maybe.
ASUS Max.
Let me say, if anybody has a solution for that, if you're running Windows 8.1 or Windows 10 preview even, and you say like, oh, there's this, you can replace the keyboard in Windows, the on-screen keyboard, just as easy as you can in Android, and here's this one that does all the stuff you want, please send me an email, twitch@twit.tv, and I'll take a look at it and report back. So anyway, continue. Sorry.
No worries. More entitlement right up for PC Per. ASUS Maximus VII. The Impact motherboard review. I should say the ASUS Maximus VII Impact motherboard review, but it's just Impact is such a strange name for a motherboard. I mean, it's kind of got that tactical gamery thing going on, and which makes sense because it's an ROG, Asus Republic of Gamers. $239.99. And this is a micro ATX? Really?
Mini ITX. Yeah, look, it's got, it's so tiny.
It's tweeny.
It is a Z97 motherboard with 2 DIMM slots, 4 SATA ports, 1 full-size PCI Express slot. It's still got support for the MPCIe combo card there towards the bottom. That can support wireless and storage devices. I mean, look at that. Look at your power connectors on the right-hand side there, kind of mashed in. They're still able to get a physical start and reset button on there as well. And then they were able to do this by, if you look, I think if you scroll a little bit down on that page, you'll see a picture that looks at, says like 10K Japanese made black metallic capacitors. Yeah, that one right there. A lot of the power delivery is actually on a daughter board, a riser board, if you will, at the top.
They got a whole audio system with a headphone amp on a riser board.
Yeah. That's pretty cool stuff. Right?
Yes.
To get on there, and again, it's a $240 mini ITX motherboard. It's pretty expensive, and all of those riser boards kind of limit your physical space for CPU cooler to some degree. But again, you can get so many features and so much performance out of a platform in this super tiny mini ITX form factor that it's kind of amazingly impressive. Actually, scroll down a little bit more and you'll see the next picture. I think after that one or a couple after that, you'll see the back panel where you have DisplayPort, HDMI, optical audio on the left-hand side. And then look, you've got buttons, your power buttons. Yeah, postcode reader and stuff on there that's kind of outward facing in that regard, but still having room for gigabit Ethernet, quad USB 3.0 ports, a PS2 port, I guess. I don't really understand that one, I guess.
Because you don't have an IBM Model M keyboard.
That's true. I do not. That's very true.
What I love is some of the youngest, most hardcore gamers I know are like, oh, where did you get the IBM Model M keyboard? I'm like, I've got a box of them in storage. Do you know what those are worth? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
They were priceless to me when I started ordering them.
I still do have one keyboard here that has the 5-pin DIN on it. Right. The Model M probably has that, right? And you convert it to PS2.
I actually have a couple that were PS2 from the factory.
Oh, okay.
Which probably means technically it's not a Model M, except everything but the cable is a Model M, and I don't want to get into too many arguments about that. It's just a sack of awesome, and it weighs 20 pounds, so it's also a zombie offensive tool. Zombie whipping board, stick, keyboard. So performance, I assume, was as good as every other ASUS ROG motherboard, taking names and kicking ass.
Yeah, right. I mean, Z97 chipsets, you know what you're getting. These will support Haswell and the Haswell refresh processors like Devil's Canyon. Benchmarking was exactly where you expected it to be. No higher and no lower. Performance of motherboard. The performance of the motherboard specific components are going to be relatively static, pretty much across the board.
Well, I mean, I'm laughing because I'm looking at like the Linpack benchmark. I'm like, oh wait, this one's 0.3 of a point faster on a 104-point scale. Yep. They're all the same.
Correct. Correct. So it all comes down to what the software is, what the included accessories and applications are. Overclocking is obviously something there to pay attention to. Yep. Yep.
I love the audio. It's got a daughter board with a headphone amplifier on it. I would.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive stuff.
I mean, it's funny because it almost I keep wanting to think that the mini ATX is just as popular as ATX, and then I remember that that's probably, then I look at like the 34 motherboards that came out this fall, and I realize it's really not as popular as I think it is. Or is there any way to really way to quantify how many people are building, mini versus full size ATX systems?
It's hard to say. Nobody's actually giving me hard numbers on something like that. If I were to guess, just kind of anecdotally, I would say that mini ITX is probably still third in terms of throughput. If full size ATX being first, micro ATX being second, and then mini ITX. You really have to very specifically want a mini ITX platform, right? You can kind of fall into a micro ATX system because you can put a micro ATX motherboard into a regular ATX case, and those regular ATX cases are pretty inexpensive. But when you get into mini ITX, the motherboards are going to be more expensive. The cases are going to be more expensive. And a lot of times the other components and stuff that you have to work with are going to be harder to deal with in general, right? So you don't kind of accidentally build a mini ITX system because of sales or your budget or something like that. You kind of have to plan for that. Whereas with the other two, depending on the whim of that vendor or retailer or motherboard manufacturer at the time, prices will vary quite dramatically. So it would be easy to go into one and not necessarily know that you were making a big difference there. So I still think they're very popular. They're growing in popularity, I guess I should say. And it's because of lower power consumption GPUs, processors. If you take the Devil's Canyon out of it, like Haswell processors that use 80 watts or 78 watts or less, very efficient when running at idle. That you can cram all this hardware into a small space and still be relatively safe with all of it. So it's definitely a great motherboard if you're interested in that platform. But
I don't know. I'm into small PCs at this point.
It's pretty
possibly because I'm tired of carrying around the Rip Monster 3000, which has been getting upgraded with Blu-ray drives and just seems to get heavier every time I pick it up.
Those blue lasers, they're heavier.
Those heavier lasers, the blue ones. Oh, man. Sebastian Peak for PCPro.com. Cases and cooling, NZXT H440, designed by Razer, Mid-Tower enclosure review. And you can tell it's designed by Razer because it has a big green Razer logo up on the front. This is... I think this may be the most understated product design-wise, most understated design I've seen come out of Razer. Green backlighting, power buttons. I actually really like, if you look right there, if you're looking at the top of the case, those are the USB ports, green instead of blue for the USB 3.0 ports, microphone, headphone buttons, power button. I actually really like the way those are up on the top. Big, clean, flat environment, decent amount of storage inside. Mini ITX, micro ATX, ATX, 7 expansion slots. No internal 5.25-inch drive bays. So if you're looking to score, disc, if you're looking to run optical disc, this is not your system. But 6 3.5-inch drive bays, 2 2.5-inch drive bays. Room for 240-inch radiators on the front and on the top, and then one 140-inch radiator in the rear. Good size case, too. It looks like. How is the build quality?
Is the lack of optical drives a killer for you?
I find
it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was laughing, right? Because I literally have one system with 9 optical drives inside of it. So I'm a freak of nature. And I put an optical drive inside of my server box just because I had one and it was force of habit. And then I have, a couple other boxes. And I've just, I don't think twice about a laptop without an optical drive. I don't really think twice about an all-in-one without an optical drive because I'm using one of those with 0 issues. I don't think it's a deal breaker, especially, if you're a gamer, if you're a gamer and you use Steam, what's the last time you actually had an optical disc to load?
Yeah, it's been a while. I think the front of it, you get a really clean look on the front of the case because you don't have any of the edges from, floppy drives or optical drive bays.
Right.
So I'd be willing to trade that. But
it's clean. There's a ton of space. It's kind of funny, it's not funny at all. It's smart, right? But if you look at the inside of the case, there's a ton of pass-through slots for cable management, which is a big deal because I was laughing because when we redid the Rip Monster, because there's a ton of cabling inside of that box, there just wasn't enough space to pass through all the cables for all of the drive bays without ending up with some extra long cables in a couple of spots and routing them in really, difficult ways. But this is obviously, they're thinking about cable layout in here. They've done a good job of segmenting off the power supply area to keep the heat from the power supply out of the main section of the case. It is kind of funny to see no optical drive bays, but, noise dampening material built into it. This is, I'm not particularly surprised. Above and beyond the fact that I'm not a huge fan of the shape of most of Razer's mice, they seem to be reasonably well made and a pretty solid look. But this is a pretty interesting case. Did you see the little sort of what is going on there in the middle of the back of the case with all the cabling running out of it? That was the one thing that kind of confused.
The fan controller, I think that's a fan speed controller there.
That's hub. Pretty smart.
Yeah. Did you notice the window at the bottom for the power supply? There's a little Razer logoed window there's a little winder down there.
You go down to the holler later on.
Yeah, exactly. Room for water cooling on the front or on the back side of it. I'm pretty impressed with the case, really.
And also, I really like it's subtle, but they did a matte sort of gray interior color on it, which is very different from the exterior color, and everything, including as Sebastian points out, even the drive holders, everything inside of this case is painted. The interior is painted the same color, and that's kind of a detail you don't really run into in cases. Right. Usually there's kind of a hodgepodge of colors inside, or it's just matching the exterior paint color. I like it. It's thoughtful. Did the noise blocking, the noise damping material in the doors work reasonably well, or how did it fare under full testing?
I think so. Let's see. It's on the last page. No, it was still louder than the other cases in there. GPU temperatures, the temperatures were good. CPU temp and GPU temperatures were the lowest of the cases that he looked at, but noise, it was the highest over ambient. So it is indicative of the fans that they include with the system for sure. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to a Fractal Define, it's pretty loud. But that's manageable. So yeah, a little speed control on the fans would help up with that one. I like that last picture where you see it lit.
Yeah. And you can see he's got like a GeForce card in there. If you've got that, it's got a similar color green emanating from it all there. It's
including the ground effects lighting underneath it.
Yeah. And if you're not a fan of the green, this case essentially is available in both red, like a red, where it's black and red or black and white options as well. So most of the other, just from a quick look at the photos here on Amazon, looks like pretty much everything else looks the same in regards to feature set. You won't get the fancy green LEDs. I do like that on the back. He's showing a picture of the light that illuminates the back panel connectors. That's pretty cool.
Very stylish. So you're paying like an extra $30 for the razor styling.
Yeah, you are.
You know, he said that some of the fit and finish wasn't what he expected at the price range. Like, you know, the threading on some of for the thumb screw holes wasn't particularly clean. So some of the screws were hard to fit. Some of the trays didn't want to slide in. And it is, you know, the one good thing is though the matte black paint, Sebastian says, is highly resistant to visible fingerprints.
I am a fan of that after using so many products that have highly visible fingerprints. A little bit of matte finish I could go for. I still prefer my laptops and stuff with matte finish if possible. So
Samsung 850 EVO, 120 gigabytes and 500 gigabyte RAID and rapid review. VNAND goes TLC. And we should probably point out, by the way, if the biggest news story on the planet has broken somewhere around December 11th, and it is not in this episode of TWiCH, it's because we're taping this early to fit in with the production schedule at the cottage, or I should say the brick house. And I just want to point that out because we didn't point it out at the top of the show. But you know, it's funny. I just bought a 1 terabyte Samsung drive. And I'm happy in knowing that this drive may be faster, but not in any meaningful way that I will notice in my day-to-day use.
Yeah, you know, you could almost say that about most SSDs these days, with the exception of very small capacities at write speeds. Low cost, low capacity drives and write speeds tend to suffer there. But yeah, the 850 EVO, this just launched basically this morning as we record this. Is the continuation of Samsung's vertical NAND, VNAND technology from the 850 Pro onto other product lines, right? So what's the key feature of the EVO series is the inclusion of SLC cache. So it's VNAND flash, but it's using TLC, triple level cell memory, which means you can store 3 bits per cell instead of 2 bits per cell on MLC and 1 bit per cell SLC. So you get more capacity and less memory, thus lowering costs, thus, you know, making it cheaper for everybody to buy in theory. But the TLC, the deficit, the detriment, I guess, of TLC is that it has slower write speeds than most other than MLC flash, right? So they make up for it by using an SLC cache that is on each. There's a little bit of SLC cache on each die that's distributed throughout the part. And this was the same thing that they did on the 840 EVO, in addition to what they're doing on the 850 EVO here. Now, the difference is with the 850, they're using vertical NAND, VNAND. So you get performance benefits of that and capacity benefits and cost benefits to that as well. So you're kind of taking the same progressive steps down in technology. They're not exact. They don't exactly specify how much cache there is. It's not something you can manage. It's not something you get to adjust. It's just something that I think it's like, I think Alan we were estimating based on performance testing that the cache was 3 gigabytes on the 2 smaller capacity drives and 6 gigabytes on the 2 larger capacity drives. And the result of that is your write speeds will be very, very, very fast until you saturate, you know, more than that much writing, and then they will drop down to TLC speeds, which are actually improved over the 840 EVO because of the move to VNAND. Now, chances are not many people are ever going to be writing more than 3 gigs or especially 6 gigs of data to their drive at a time. So you will almost always get the performance of the cached based versions of these things. And so it stores an SLC cache, and then once it's idle, it kind of, you know, background filters into TLC. So the effective speed that you see is the SLC speeds there. So it does use a new controller. It's rated at sequential reads of 540 megabytes, sequential writes at 520. Very, very good specifications on this for a drive that's going to launch at fairly low costs. It's funny if you look at the second page and you look at the pictures that Alan took of the internals. If you look at the 850 EVO 120 gig SSD, the physical package, it's on the one on the left there. The physical PCB and design is so small in relation to the 2.5-inch drive that it's comical, right? Like
that's literally the green PCB is all the guts.
That's
Everything
everything.
else is yeah.
Yeah,
And
you've
the
got
rest
the
of it's
controller
just
in the
filler.
middle. You've got some system memory up top and one of the flash chips on the front. And I don't even think there's one on the back. I'm not sure. I'm not. Oh, yeah. Actually, if you scroll down a couple more pictures, you'll see the one on the left there, and then go down one more picture, and on the back there's literally nothing. So you're looking at the controller and 120 gigs of flash all on the same side of that tiny PCB there. So it makes you think about why notebooks and all-in-ones and ultrabooks and like really thin machines, why they get away from these standards, form factor standards as often as they do, and why there seem to be so many competing, M.2 and different sizes of M.2 and PCIe versus SATA versions of it, is because of things like this. When a notebook vendor says, man, I could save so much space if I don't have to shove a 2.5-inch drive in there, and instead I can shove this tiny little PCB, and we can even make that smaller by getting rid of those connectors. And it's just kind of a side note thing there, but it's funny to see it inside of the entirety of that
It puts it in perspective.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely does.
Just to realize how much space they can save by getting rid of the 2.5-inch drive enclosure.
Yep.
$500 for 1 terabyte. Oops, sorry.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say you could go through and look at the benchmarks. I'm not going to run through them here. I don't spend a lot of time on that. He did do one thing to point out. I don't think we saw anywhere else that had tested it was RAID testing. So if you wanted to see a pair of 850 EVOs running in RAID 0, which is the most common. What is common for a lot of people is that they will buy 2 120s that they find on sale instead of buying 1 240. So you can kind of see how those performance metrics work out, and as you expect, it's a lot faster. So, and then also tests Rapid, which is kind of like a Windows software caching implementation of that. So, it's definitely worth looking at. It's pretty neat stuff. If you want to get 60,000 plus IOPS out of your system for some reason, you can do that and brag about it as you go. Or if you need to get, let's see, what's that? That's with Rapid, you can get, I don't know, upwards of 6 terabytes per second of effective throughput there. It's a little bit like cheating, but you could do it if you want. Anyway, you were going to mention the pricing, which is important as well.
Yeah, I was going to say it's $500 for 1 terabyte drive, which is a little spendy compared to an average terabyte SSD right now. $270 for the 500 gigabyte, 150 for the 250 gigabyte, and $100 for the 120 gigabyte version.
Yeah, the
later this
850
month.
Pro 1 terabyte is currently selling for like $629.
Yeah.
So it's lower price than that, but I do think that those prices are probably higher than where they will settle when they're actually for sale on Amazon and Newegg. Right now, they're not as we record this. I'd expect them to be a little bit lower. And I think as somebody pointed out to both of us on Twitter, like the 840 EVOs, now that their firmware is fixed and all the performance issues are kind of addressed, those are going to be cheap for as long as they're still around, I think. So keep an eye out for those as well.
And we talked about it last week pretty extensively. But the Samsung's one of the 2 drives still standing in that crazy tech report. They're at 2 petabytes now and climbing in terms of the abuse test.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's like it's over a year at this point that they've been going. So the Samsung 840 series is pretty much probably the last one standing by now. Although, where is it? Samsung 840 died. Kingston HyperX 3K went. The Intel 335 with Cursor Neutron GTX went. So the 840 Pro and a second HyperX 3K have now hit 2 petabytes of writes. And to put that into perspective, and I gotta shout out to Jeff over at Tech Report. Not that I know him, but I love the fact that he points out, these two drives have hit 2 petabytes of writes, and the SSDs in his main desktop have logged less than 2 terabytes of writes over the past couple of years. Obviously, a different story if you're a video editor or something like that, doing a lot of production. But still, it gives you an idea that SSDs may be fairly sturdy if things keep going. Makes me happy. We should take a moment to thank something else that makes me happy. The tools and products from iFixit, ladies and gentlemen. You've probably noticed Ryan and I tend to take things apart. We even put them back together again. We don't always put them back together on my former show, Die Trying, but we used to try really hard. and we should point out this episode is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. If you haven't seen them, iFixit's teardowns are amazing. iPhone 6, the latest Samsung phones, new consoles. They give them a repairability rating, essentially. If you haven't seen them, and if you watch the show, you've seen us talk about them. They make some really, they distribute, they sell some really nice tools at iFixit. I use my iFixit tools just about every day. And I'm going to show you the ProTech Toolkit and the Magnetic Project Mat. And it's really cool. They've got a special holiday bundle, $74.95 for it. The ProTech Toolkit has 70 tools to pretty much help you deal with anything, whether it's a mod, a malfunction, or something that's going horribly wrong involving, say, dropping your phone. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, inside that beautiful tool roll you're looking at right now is a collection of incredibly useful tools, including what you're seeing right now, iFixit's 54-bit driver kit, 54 standard specialty security bits, a very nice swivel top precision screwdriver. That skinny piece in the middle is the flex extensions for hard to reach screws. So essentially, if you can't get a screwdriver to that screw in the corner of that stereo case, you can use that flex extension. Look at that, kids. Not only that, but you turn it and the screw turns too. ESD, that's electrostatic discharge safe tweezers for delicate manipulation, spudgers, both nylon and metal, plastic opening tools for prying, scraping tools when you're getting the glue off that delete expletive product with a broken screen. The tool roll is really nice because it keeps everything all in one place. And if you want to fix a doorknob, I used one of the bits inside the 54-bit driver kit to fix a toilet seat just yesterday, ladies and gentlemen. It is a nice collection. And if you haven't seen it, the Magnetic Project Mat has replaced blue sticky tape for a lot of my projects. And I use the blue sticky tape to, make a little loop of the blue sticky tape and put it on the tabletop or put it on the baking sheet, and each little screw goes out. And what that is literally a sheet of magnetic material that you can write on. So it's a whiteboard, it's magnetic, and you can organize your parts while you repair it. So each little thing, you can label them as you're going along. Outside case screws, hard drive screws, GPU screws, dog screws. It's not going to wipe your hard drive. It's not going to wipe your SSD. It's not going to wipe your micro SD cards. It's perfectly safe. And that dry erase surface, yes, ladies and gentlemen, you can wipe it off and start all over again. Never lose another screw again, people. And this is just a small fraction of the awesomeness you can find at iFixit.com. And if you go to iFixit.com/twit, not only will you find something for every DIYer, hacker, or geek on your list, you're going to see holiday deals, including the ProTech Toolkit and Magnetic Mat Bundle for a mere $74.95. And when you enter the code TWiCH, that's TWiCH at checkout, you'll save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. You will help keep Ryan and I bringing the show to you each and every week. So please, if you're shopping for the geeks on your list or people that just need to fix things, you got a nephew in school, you got a daughter-in-law that's always fixing the kids' toys, go to iFixit.com/twit, check out the ProTech Toolkit and Magnetic Mat Bundle, and do us a favor, enter in that code TWiCH at checkout. That's iFixit.com/twit. Use the code TWiCH, TWiCH. We want to thank iFixit for their continued support of the podcast.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness. I literally fixed the toilet with it. Replacing iPad screens, check. LG G3 screen, check. Toilet seat, check. It's just that useful, people. Oh my goodness. There's nothing better than a recently repaired toilet seat. Ask me how I know. Actually, there's a lot of things that are better than a recently repaired toilet seat, like the Steam broadcasting introduced to the Steam client. Actually, I'm going to be rude and say I'm probably a bigger fan of the recently repaired toilet seats. This is an interesting move. Okay, Steam, the Valve company, video games on demand, or video games. Basically, you buy video games to the Steam interface. I don't know why I said on demand, but this. So let's point this out. This is available on the Steam client. Scott Michaud wrote this up for PC Per. The Steam client on Windows 7 and 8.x. Valve says they're going to bring it to the Linux and OS 10 and apparently Vista versions for some reason. Remember Vista? Yeah. You have to opt in to receive the beta releases of the Steam client. Watching a stream is only possible with one of three web browsers: Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and the one that's built into Valve's Steam client. So I'm just going to go straight to Scott's second paragraph. Quote, obviously, the pre-launch browser support is quite disappointing. Clearly, Valve limited support of their web app to the rendering engine of choice, WebKit, and its fork Blink, and that is a step up from doing it in Flash. It is probably most disappointing for Opera, who switched to WebKit and later Blink from their proprietary Presto engine. Valve is focusing on user choice with their offering. While public streams will be allowed, you are allowed other privacy options. Public is not even the default. Your stream can also be set to only allow invited friends, allow all friends, or allow friends to request viewing permissions. Now on to the speculation. Why would Valve be doing this? Well, because Amazon thinks it's $1 billion business.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good reason right there, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean,
it's very interesting to see Steam create competition for TWiCH, for essentially what NVIDIA is doing, or with GeForce Experience, or what AMD is doing with their Gaming Evolved application. Right. It's a little bit limited now in its first iteration, but if you are if you use Steam very heavily, just as like friends lists, groups, all that kind of stuff, it could be very useful for that in terms of not having to duplicate a lot of that work, right? If you only want your 6 friends to be able to watch and chat while you're doing this, then it's very easy to do if you already have the group or those friends set up in Steam. Whereas if you went with TWiCH, or you went with the other streaming services out there, you have to set up a new account and do different things, and your friends have to have accounts if you want it to be a private session or something. So it's kind of interesting to see that they did this, because I had also heard in the not too recent memory that a deal that was supposed to happen that didn't actually happen, where they were supposed to integrate NVIDIA's kind of streaming technology into Steam. So clearly that didn't happen, and they decided to go their own route, take advantage of it on their own. Obviously, they have the expertise to do that. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but not a huge deal yet. But you can try it out if you opt into the beta releases of the Steam client in the settings menu. So
I'm going to hold off on humiliating myself by broadcasting my video game play for a little while longer.
I highly recommend it, because I don't hold off on that, and people can be crap all the time. I die a lot in video games, as it turns out, and when it's very public, it's I think you get over the embarrassment part of it pretty quick, in my experience.
I'll keep that in mind. Or you're probably just looking for somebody who's going to get killed even more than you are. Galaxy Note 4, probably not what you're thinking of when you're thinking of virtual worlds. But apparently the Galaxy Note 4 is going to be, look, the Gear VR Innovator Edition, $200, the gadget that turns a Galaxy Note 4 into a headset. It's kind of unbelievably fun and unbelievably ridiculous. But the Gear VR, which was developed in partnership with Oculus VR, features an optical lens that has a 96-degree field of view and utilizes gyrometer, geomagnetic proximity, and accelerator sensors. For controls, it comes with a built-in touchpad, back button, volume key, and control for focal adjustments. And then there's a Samsung gamepad sold separately or bundled, depending on which one you buy. The thing is, if you want to use the Gear VR, you're going to need to own Samsung's Galaxy Note 4. And I'm reading off a MaximumPC.com article on this one. Because you connect it via micro USB, and then the Gear VR uses the Galaxy Note 4's ever so delightful 5.7-inch Quad HD Super AMO LED display. which is run at a rocking resolution of 2560 by 1440, which looks really, really good 3 feet away from your face. So it must look either awesome or horrifying 3 inches in front of your eyeballs. So powered by the Oculus Mobile SDK, which is cool because anybody can download it, and basically uses the low latency 3DOF tracking and apparently sub 20 millisecond motion to photons latency, which means in theory, Ryan should not puke immediately after pulling a Gear VR on and entering a video game. So
I like to think that would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, they've got some 3D 360-degree video content, such as a portion of the Cirque du Soleil show Zarkena that was filmed for the Gear VR, so you can watch Cirque du Soleil, in 3D, well, in 3D 360-degree, however many times you can watch that before you go insane. And then there's a game you've never heard of, and another multiplayer game you've never heard of, some titles and demos. So what I'm saying, and I'm being kind of obnoxious about it, is it's cool and it's shiny and it checks all the boxes, except there's not a lot of content for it because there's not a lot of virtual reality content anywhere, including the Oculus Rift. That, of course, promises to change. But this, if you have a Galaxy Note 4 and you're looking to really get giggled at on the train while you're commuting, Gear VR, it's there for you. Twitch at twit.tv is the email address if you want to ask us a question, or and we understand that it's a little difficult to figure this one out because we are extraordinarily creative about this kind of thing. At Ryan Shrout and at Patrick Norton, if you want to tweet at us on Twitter. We got a question from John about YGig, and we've been meaning to do this one for a couple of weeks. We're finally going to get to it. You and Josh mockingly, and when I say you and Josh, Ryan and Josh mockingly discussed YGig, and I don't blame you. It's so far from our current Wi-Fi routers that it's hard to call it the same tech. And a point of interest, it's actually not great on Mars either, as the higher frequencies dissipate faster as a general rule. 60 gigahertz is so bad with attenuation that according to various places on the internet, things like a cabinet or a kite is enough to block the signal. This was common for those wireless HDMI adapters, but they're largely downgraded to the 5.8 gigahertz range. Despite how bad 11AD sounds, I'm super excited of it. I have a one-bedroom apartment with a landlord who won't let me run Ethernet through the walls. Did you know that's not considered cruel and unusual? Anyway, the moment I can get 2x 802.1180 routers to form a wireless bridge, that Ethernet cable across my living room floor will be no more. And it will be glorious, since obviously there won't be much interference from, say, the neighbors. I feel pretty safe using this wireless bridge across my living room with gigabit Ethernet running to the router, of course. Note, obviously, I will still have a standard Wi-Fi router as well on the dual 2.5 and 5.8 gigahertz band. But AD seems perfect for that bridge across the living room. Is there any reason this is a terrible idea and I shouldn't be excited?
Price,
the fact that
2 routers.
It's going to be an expensive day at your house.
It's going to be an expensive Ethernet cable replacement for sure.
I mean, okay, so it's going to run faster than Powerline, or at least most Powerline I've seen. It's going to run faster than existing Wi-Fi technology. There are a number of ways to hide an Ethernet cable, and floorboard trim and stuff like that, depending on the architecture of the apartment you're in, or the judicious use of the flattest Ethernet cable you can find and rugs. But yeah, no, that's true. It sounds like you are the perfect use scenario. I live in a tiny apartment and I need to get point A and point B connected.
We need to have not a lot of walls between those places. And that would seem to work out. Because I think when we talked about it on the show, I mentioned that my office would be an instance of that. We have, 1,200 square foot area. It's all open, right? You put one kind of on the ceiling in the middle, and you'd probably be able to address pretty much everything you need to address. So he has, I see no reason why you shouldn't be excited other than the fact that if you buy in early, it's going to be expensive to buy those
$250 expensive, or like $700 expensive?
I'd say $250 expensive, but you may have to buy 2. I don't know if you'll be able to buy like a router and then like a bridging device, if that will be there at launch, or only routers, in which case you have to buy 2 routers and put one in bridge mode. That would double your cost essentially. So
you got that.
A good idea in theory. Yeah.
You know what? I am excited that
Mm-hmm.
John is going to be able to solve his dragging a cable through the house problem. Because I will say, once you've had a date trip over the Ethernet cable in your living room, it's hard to recover from that one.
Yeah, I could see that being a faux pas. Yeah.
At Roost MD says, at Ryan Stroud, at Patrick Norton, buy the XB280HK or wait. Any idea how long before it's possible to buy a display with 4K G-Sync IPS and greater than 60 hertz refresh rates? And is there any updates since last week about G-Sync tearing?
No, nothing's really, you're talking about the flickering stuff?
Yeah.
No,
flicker,
nothing's really changed there. But I don't know how much you and Robert got into it. But it's a very minimalist issue, I think. I should say it's not as big of a problem, right? Because it's only happening when your frame rate dips to 0. And chances are when your frame rate dips to 0, you have other problems that you're worried about other than your display flickering.
Right.
I mean, clearly it's annoying and it shouldn't happen. They should figure out a way to fix it. But nothing has really changed on that front. The XB280HK that he references is the current Acer 4K G-Sync panel. It's a 60 hertz TN G-Sync panel. So he's asking about
for sale, because it's like it's out of stock at Newegg. They don't have it listed on Amazon.
Oh, really? Yeah, I mean it's definitely relatively new, within a couple of months. XB280HK, but oops, if I gotta learn to type. Also, Amazon search is pretty bad sometimes too. So, it's definitely out there. Hey, look, they've got the XB270H is kind of the 1080p variant of that same things. But he's looking for 4K with G-Sync, which that monitor has, but with IPS and greater than 60 hertz refresh rate. You're going to be waiting a while. Yeah, like I think you'll get IPS next year with those specifications probably, but greater than 60 hertz refresh rate is going to be harder. To get to 100 or 120 is going to be tough. I won't say definitely not 2015, but I will say that if it's 2015, it's going to be expensive. I would say like you're going to be on the bleeding edge of all of those technologies, and when you're on the bleeding edge of all of those technologies, then it's going to be expensive.
Yeah, I mean, also there's not a huge market for 4K gaming, right? And G-Sync is very much a gaming technology. 4K is requiring you to spend all the money on graphics cards right now, and even if you do, there's a tiny number of video games that really effectively support 4K. Now, as Robert will point out, you can run 1080p into a 4K monitor and get a pretty good looking signal. But the reality is, you bought a 4K monitor so you could have all of each individual tiny pixel be a part of the gaming experience, and not just in bundles of 4. So yeah, I've at least next year to be remotely affordable, especially on the GPU side of things, gunning over 60 hertz. I'd say, I don't know, 18 months. 2 years next year.
I'm not discounting that it could be by the end of 2015. I have no idea, but I just feel like I've seen display technology iterate so much faster in the last 24 months than I have in the previous 5 to 7 years, that I think that there are companies trying to get to those locations, right? You think of the push to TV 4K is kind of going to ramp up production of 4K panels. It's going to increase the available resources for R&D in those areas. So I think it could happen by maybe this time next year, but I'd hate to have you wait until this time next year and have it not be there. So that's typically my mindset, I guess, on those types of things. So,
well, we should probably get you out of here, but there's one last question I want to hit before we go. Freddie's got a question about a GPU upgrade in a home theater PC. Says, love the show and all the great insight. Question, I have a home theater PC I do all my gaming on. Wanted to upgrade to a better GPU, but since I play games on a 1080p TV, I don't want to buy a card that would be bottlenecked by my display resolution and hardware. I run an AMD Phenom 2 1100 XT, that's the 6-core 3.4 gigahertz part, an MSI 990 FXA GD65 motherboard, 16 gigs of DDR3 RAM, a 250 gigabyte SSD, a 700 watt power supply with plenty of great air cooling, and my current GPU is an MSI R7850 Twin Frozer 2 gigabyte 5 overclocked edition. Since I use Windows Media Center, I have 3 other hard drives used for TV, movies, Blu-ray, etc. Since everything runs great on my setup, I have no plans on updating anything else, just my GPU. What's the best graphics card I can get with my described setup? I don't want to buy some very high dollar card if the rest of my hardware can't utilize all or most of its potential. Thanks. Looking forward to your words of wisdom. And I was laughing last week. If laughing means, being bitter and cranky about things, that my $380 gaming PC has effectively been knocked out by Far Cry 4, which wants a minimum of 4 cores. Won't boot on a 2-core. Will boot on a
that's pretty stinky.
With a couple cores, hyper-threading. And who knows, maybe that's something they'll patch in the near future, or maybe not. My understanding is it's effectively using 3 cores pretty hard. But, 750 Ti, I mean...
No, so my thinking here is I think you need to go, I don't think that the Phenom 2 processor is old. It's definitely an older generation part, but it is still a 6-core, 3.4 gigahertz. You're not going to be bottlenecked by any GPU, really, in my opinion. Will there be some games, maybe like Civilization or Far Cry or something that might be very CPU thread heavy? Assassin's Creed Unity affects everybody. But right. that the Phenom 2 will kind of get in the way of, sure. But otherwise, I think your hardware is not going to hold it back. Now, your 1080p TV is kind of it's not your limiting factor, because if you get a 980, you can always run it at higher frame rates, right? If you want to. I would say, if you're looking at a GTX, what I might look for now, actually, I'll Google this real quick. Sales on GTX 780s or GTX 770s might be a good spot to look for 1080p gamer that wants to kind of max out all their settings. I haven't really checked in a couple of weeks if the 780s are still selling for. Let's see. There's some open box. Yeah, those aren't as good a deals as I thought. 430. Or so for GTX 780 Ti. If you are comfortable if you want to go AMD instead of NVIDIA, the R9 290 is like $250 to $270, and that's going to be a fantastic card. More power than you'll need. But I think the step from an R9 285 to a 290 is pretty dramatic. So you could go either way on that. It really depends on what type of games you're playing, what your budget is. He doesn't mention in this question kind of like, hey, I'd like to spend less than X number of dollars. Right. He just kind of says he doesn't want to be bottlenecked there. An R9 285 or an R9 290 would be a good option. Or look at a GTX 770 or GTX 780, something that's kind of going to be in the lower end of that price segment, but still more than enough horsepower to play your games at 1080p. And I don't think you have to worry about any of the other hardware specifications you have. Give it another year maybe or something like that, and that Phenom part might start to get a little bit longer in the tooth, but you'll be able to take the rest of that componentry with you, I think, your SSD and your power supply and your graphics card. So I would keep that in mind. But yeah, a quick cursory glance around Newegg here doesn't show any amazing, what I would consider to be amazing deals for GTX 780s or anything like that. So looks like 770s are almost kind of out of stock everywhere as well.
Tough to find.
Yeah, I knew it was going to happen, just didn't know exactly when.
Right about the time you decide to buy one.
Yeah, $299 for GTX 770 at this point might be a little bit of a stretch. So, and everything else showing up is out of stock. So, Yeah, it's an interesting position NVIDIA is in right now because they've got their 970, but they don't really have anything below that until you get to the 760, I believe. That's kind of still regularly considered being manufactured and in stock and everything. So I have a feeling they'll be addressing that in the not too distant future. So keep that in mind too.
Ladies and gentlemen, you might want to wait, I think is what Ryan's trying to say.
I am never a proponent of waiting. I'm always a proponent of buying the stuff that you want now so that you can game.
Right.
Like there's, especially now, right? Because here is you're going to have some time off work or some time off school, right? You're going to want to play some games. Make sure you have the hardware there to make it as enjoyable an experience as possible, I guess.
So you're
I'm not
basically saying
selling. I'm not selling anything, so I don't know why I'm talking like that. But you know,
you're just thinking about playing games and having all the hardware. I mean, it's like, okay. So let me pull my last statement back. You're not suggesting that in say 6 weeks you'll be really bummed out if you spend $300 on an NVIDIA GPU today.
I do not. I do not think
Okay.
that's the case. No.
Okay. Go forth and spend, ladies and gentlemen, and enjoy a good holiday season. Oh my goodness, PC Per, what's coming up this week?
Oh geez.
What?
It may already be published by the time you hear this, see this. So we actually got in one of those MSI all-in-ones with the GTX 980M and a big 27-inch screen. It's a pretty nice piece of hardware. It's expensive. But it's a pretty nice piece of hardware. I like to see more and more stuff with HDMI input on it as well. It's kind of a neat little trick there. This week, AMD will be releasing a new GPU driver as well that has some significant performance improvements and feature improvements. By the time you listen to this or watch this, it will already be out. But there'll be a story up on PCPer.com about that. And setting up a Plex media server is a feature we're working on as well. I think a lot of people will be interested in that on this show. We get a lot of questions about that. So
No, it's Plex. Plex is either transparent, like it makes sense to you, or you beat your head against the nearest wall. And
come see what we did.
Either one.
Come see what we did.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ryan Shrout, PCPer.com, at Ryan Shrout on the Twitters. I'm at Patrick Norton. Rumor has it we'll soon be making video at avxl.com and techthing.com if the websites are up and running by the time you get this podcast into your hot little ears, which is like hot little hands, but different. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of TWiCH. You can find all the episodes of TWiCH we've recorded in the past at twit.tv/TWiCH. You can email us twitch@twit.tv. And I want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on TWiCH.